Welcome to Mental Fitness, the Gateway to Success podcast, providing business owners, leaders, and entrepreneurs with the 3 INs: insights, inspirations, and intentional actions. Delivered through monologues and dialogues, we address topics like leadership, productivity, time management, work-life balance, and challenges like stress, conflict, mental health, and much more. Please do not hold back from suggesting specific topics and guests you would like on this podcast. Greetings and welcome to this week's episode of Mental Fitness, the Gateway to Success. And you guessed it, yes, this is one of those weeks where I have a guest on. And this time it is somebody still on this planet, but in a different hemisphere to where I am. And it is James. So I'm going to let James tell us where in the world he is and who he is and what he does.
Oh boy. Well, this is great. I really appreciate you having me on. And my name's James. I live in Denver currently, although I grew up in Virginia Beach on the East Coast and then went to college in Cleveland and then with work, bounced around between Orange County, LA, Scottsdale, all the hot tech spots, I suppose, except for San Francisco. Didn't make my way up there, but, had some really cool experiences and then exited a company about 2 years ago and moved to Denver. And, right as I thought life was kind of slowing down, thought I was going to be able to kind of get a break. I ran into some health issues. So this next chapter of my life that I'm entering, I guess I'm firmly in it now. Time kind of flies, but it's been crafted around some unexpected limitations. And so, in a lot of ways, I've had an unusual career. I like to say like a 20-year career in 6 years is what it feels like, because, you bounce around from freelancing to going into an agency that's, associated with Disney to some extent, and then going into a legal marketing agency that then gets acquired by a med tech company, and, going in there as a content writer and then moving up the rungs of the ladder and eventually exiting as COO, having generated about 20 million in revenue. And I guess my claim to fame is I'm responsible for approximately 100,000 men in America being able to get an erection without taking pills. So, that's something that in the med tech space we were pretty proud of. But certainly a different type of medication than the things we'll talk about today, I'm sure. It's been a really interesting life. I've ended up building a tech company with a guy that goes way back to when we both made Eagle Scout in Virginia Beach, and we just happened serendipitously to both end up out here in Denver at the same time and have very different skill sets, different experiences, and so now we're working on this thing, and so it's always something, right?
And so, thank you so much for that introduction. Wonderful just to get a peek view into your journey. I like that saying. What did you say? 20 years and 6 years. So obviously you've gone for it, and you shared a lot of interesting things there. I'm sure that we can dive a little bit deeper into in this conversation today. And as you know, for me, what I'm looking for in all of this is the word mental fitness. Where does that fit in? And from what you shared already, it is really clear to me that the ups and the downs you've been through and the success that you've created and the transitions you've been through, all of that requires a fairly high level of mental fitness. So I'm really curious in this conversation to get an understanding of how did you build that? Where did that come from? Was it just, getting knocked over and getting back up, or did you do specific things to learn that? So maybe before we do that, we can just dive into the question of what is mental fitness. And my audience knows what I think it is, but that's just me. I would much rather hear what your thoughts are on, what does mental fitness mean to you?
Yeah, it's awkward to have somebody say that you seem like you have a lot of mental fitness or you seem like you are in good shape there, because I think it's something that is very difficult for someone to measure themselves against others, because how can you measure capacity? Because everyone's experiencing different amounts of stress, different amount of headwinds at different times. So you may appear to be weaker or stronger, but sometimes that appearance is because you're facing less or more headwinds than the person next to you. So to me, it's a capacity question. And that's what makes it so fascinating is, how do you measure it? How do you compare yourself? And I think the answer to that is you need help from outside perspectives and support of a community, or what I like to call a chosen family. So if you can build those relationships, that becomes kind of the backbone. And certainly all of the bumps and scrapes, the tuition of life, certainly contributes to the ability to bounce back and to realize that, well, this is as bad as it can get and it's not that bad.
Mm. I love that, James. So I've never heard it said that way before. And I really like that. What I wrote down here was, are we talking internal or external mental fitness? Because mostly what I'm talking about the internal is how am I feeling? There's a challenge, there's a conflict in front of me. Do I have the mental fitness to meet that, or do I shy away and say, no, I can't do this, I'm not good enough, or what are other people going to think? Or I don't have
Right.
the resilience to step back up after taking a knock. So that's all internal. And for me, it's like we can work on our own mental fitness by growing that. But you just brought a whole new perspective into it is how other people see it. And I think you're absolutely right, is that other people can see somebody as, oh, they are so mentally fit. But that person might, in their own world, not be sleeping, might be really worried and anxious, maybe even suffer from depression. But when they're up on stage singing, wow, I mean, they're obviously totally mentally fit. So thank you for bringing that into it. And any other thoughts around that you want to add?
No, I really think that's it. I mean, I go back to I think the biggest underline for me is that it comes down to your chosen family, the people that you choose to allow into your circle, and more importantly, the people you don't allow into your circle.
Yes.
And creating a circumstance where you set yourself up for success and you also set the people up around you for success.
Hmm. I agree. And so I love this. So that's a completely different trick to growing mental fitness that I haven't actually heard before, but it makes sense. So if we associate with other people that are mentally fit or even more mentally fit than we are more likely to be growing our mental fitness when we are with that family, as you call it. Whereas if we associate ourselves mostly with people who are completely mentally unfit, that is not likely, I think, to make us more mentally fit. So I agree, the having the right people around us. So what was that? I
Well,
guess
the
to
one
me,
tweak I'd make there.
yeah.
So I love that and I agree with you, but I think there's another side to the coin, which is the people around you are going to experience different challenges. And by you being there for them, you get to kind of inoculate yourself against those challenges in a way without, if you experience them yourself, if you've seen somebody else go through it, if you've been there when somebody else was going through it, now you're in a better position from an outsider perspective to be able to handle that in the moment. So it becomes an educational tool and a preparatory tool.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. And in that, your mental fitness grows so that you can meet challenges in a better way. So I'm excited to hear some stories from you of both sides of the coin, those things that didn't go so well. Um, and it didn't go so well because at the time, in that moment, the mental fitness wasn't there to pull through on whatever. And then on the other side of the coin, we have those that things just go really well and we have great success, not because it's easy, but because at that point in time, in that moment, there was mental fitness enough to do what needed to be done. So you can choose what side of the coin you want to start on, but I would love to hear things on both sides. So
Yeah, well, I'll give you an exclusive. I've never talked about this publicly, and this will be news to my parents. So, hi, mom and dad. But uh, so college, my first year of college was my only year of college. I left school after that, and the way I played it off was, oh, I'm going to transfer to a community college because they've got a program where I can go to an even better school if I do that. And the reality was I got kicked out. And the reason I got kicked out is because I wasn't making it to class. I wasn't really on a sleep cycle. I wasn't keeping up with my obligations, and I wasn't practicing any mental health hygiene. And so my life just kind of slowly ran off the rails. And yeah, I was dealing with some medical issues as well, but there was a mental health component to it that I wasn't addressing. And part of it was my fault because I didn't address it in the best way. But the other part is lack of resources and knowledge and understanding. Something I know now that I didn't know back then is that I'm on the spectrum. I like to joke that, well, Greta Thunberg got a boat. She went over to Israel not too long ago, so I want my boat because I'm on the spectrum too, but I'm still waiting for my boat to arrive. But the the reality of how your brain works and how you process things, and when you have a framework to look at how things operate, and then you understand your internal processes to compensate. And so, people will say, oh my gosh, you're charismatic or very outgoing and everything. And sometimes that's literally a defense mechanism. And it's the result
Mm,
of overcompensating
mm,
for things that don't add up and things that you can't relate to. And so you're constantly trying to relate and try to compensate in a way that makes it look like, oh yeah, that person doesn't have any issue there, when really inside they're screaming.
mm,
So again, I think just overall, um, I think that number one, I hope my parents aren't listening to this podcast, but also, uh, I think it's so incredibly important that people access help and get that outside perspective, because if you don't, then you're just stuck in your own soup and your own misery, and you're not going to be able to move forward. And the reality is that progress is success. So that's kind of my big takeaway from
mm,
the lows in life.
mm. And it seems, funnily enough, that we seem to have the lows to actually really move forward. Like when everything is rosy and easy, it seems that for most people like that, there's not much progress. Like in my own life, the biggest growth in my life has always come out of pain. So, thank you for that story. And you were talking there about mental health as well, and reaching out. And I was fortunate when I was in my late 20s. I was a very shy, very withdrawn, and uh, I would do whatever I could, as you said, just to pretend that I was fine, but
Right.
internally I wasn't. But fortunately, I had a colleague in the computer company I worked for that could see that, well, this guy could do with some help. So he came to me and tried to enroll me into one of those weekend courses run by somebody from over your side of the world, uh, being in English and me not speaking that much English at the time. And normally, to get people onto a weekend course of that cost, you have to enroll them and really talk them into it.
Mhm.
He just told me about it, and I just asked, where do I sign? I
Right.
have no idea where that came from. It's just, well, I need to go and do that course. I hated the course, and I walked away from it. So it was a waste of time. And 3 days later, I realized that it had completely changed my life, like completely 360 turn on my life. And other people were telling me, what happened to you? Initially, nothing happened. And for me, somebody was there to help me. And he was in my family in a work sense, and support it. And that's why I became passionate about coaching and helping other people. So, I'm one of those people that people can come to and share, and can then give them a perspective on how they can move on. So thank you for leading into that. Have you got another story of those on the so-called negative side from your work? Uh,
Oh, for sure. I definitely have plenty of them, but I want to circle back to something you said that I think is so interesting. And you talk about you have to go through the down times to get up, and I think of it the way I mentally envision it is that life is like a slingshot. You have to, pull back before you can let go and propel forward. And
mm,
so there's a lot of people who they don't stick around long enough for the slingshot to go all the way to the back and
mm,
actually produce that elasticity, that push forward. And so if you're able to endure and able to continue on, sometimes that rebound is
mm,
incredibly sweet. So
mm,
that's one perspective. The other is you kind of hit on something that I've experienced, which is the healing, the transition, the thing doesn't happen during the thing sometimes. So, you went to this course and you had this experience, and the whole time you're like, this sucks. I can't wait to get out of here. But
mhm.
then you realize there's something that got reconfigured in your head, and you had a new pathway to process things, even against your will, that when you finally used it, you're like, oh shit, this is way better. So, uh, I love that because I think a lot of people mistake the idea that everything happens in 90 minutes because we watch these movies where there's this huge character arc, and everything happens within 90 minutes and it's all right there, bing, bang, boom, and it's all scripted. That's not life. Life happens in a way that's very discontinuous from, what you're going through versus where you are mentally, and where you are in your perception of things, and in the moment versus later. So I think those are things that are powerful, that if I understood those things earlier, I would have been able to achieve more, or enjoy life more.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like the growth path, whether it's in sports, whether it's in life, whether it's in business, really seems to go like this. Like
Right.
it's a roller coaster. And for me, as long as it's going upwards, it's all right, even though sometimes I feel like it's actually going really backwards. But as you said, I love that picture of the slingshot, like just keep pulling until it's time for it to release, or for you to release it, whatever the situation may be. So I'm still keen to hear just another quick story from one of those times where things from a work point, because a lot of the people listening to this are business people, something that they might be able to relate to a story there on that side of things as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of invert the question a little bit. So you're asking about a time where I had difficulty or had a great experience, and I'm going to go with the opposite, where I was having this amazing experience, and then suddenly it's like the floor dropped out from underneath me. So when I worked at my previous company, the CEO of that company, one of the co-founders, probably one of the most brilliant men I've ever met in my life. Someone who, when you were talking to him, you could tell that if he had had this conversation before, it's almost like the scene from Star Wars where the credits are going past. Like, in a way, his brain was just operating on, or his mouth was operating on autopilot, just reading the script in front of his eyes, but his brain was somewhere else processing some problem that he's been working on in the background. He was an incredible inventor, incredibly funny, and somebody who pretty much really shrugged off every normalcy of life and kind of built a world around his views of how things should be. And it kind of worked for him. Our perspective when we worked with him, and this is somebody who is like a second father to us. I mean, this is somebody who, when we were in the trenches building this company, it was like he didn't have a real family as far as we knew. He never talked about his family. And so it was just, it seemed like we were it. It seemed like he was building a family within the company in a way. And um, anyways, in rapid succession, he has a heart attack, passes away, driving on the 405, back from a doctor's appointment of all things. Um, and then we get that news, and then we find out that this guy that we thought was like a billionaire, like the really secretive billionaire in Hollywood, um, he was someone with the relationships, but he may not have had the financials that he seemed to have. And it turned out that he was spending company money to support that image. And so we're talking about a collection of Rolls Royces and Phantoms and Raptors and just a whole bunch of different vehicles and historical antiques. And he had a Batmobile that he was fabricating, and a speed racer car that he was fabricating. So, we had this warehouse at the company that was massive. It was like 20,000 square feet. And there was no good logical reason for our company to need that level of a warehouse, except it allowed him to set up an auto shop inside the warehouse where his full-time fabricator mechanic was able to work on the vehicles. And he had a whole fleet of vehicles. And the whole time we're thinking this guy's just somebody who has an incredible amount of wealth and has invented many things. And he did invent many things. He had, great patents and a long history of having an impact on the world. But it also turned out he invented his success in that moment, or in that chapter of life. And so appearances can be very deceiving. And so
Mm.
in those moments where you're on top of the world, you feel like you're set for life because you've got somebody who's a mentor who is truly looking out for you. And then you realize, that sense of betrayal, and realizing that, okay, now we've got to clean up the mess. And
Mm.
this mess that was left behind, I mean, it was there's varying estimates as to how much embezzlement occurred, but the high end of the estimates, which I don't necessarily agree with, are around $12 million. And the the challenge of that, the anemic state of the cash flow in the company as a result of all this other stuff that we didn't know we were supporting on the books. So, in that moment, I was in a director role. I didn't have anything to do with the finances. I was primarily involved in customer experience, which is exactly as awesome as it sounds in the erectile dysfunction space. But uh, the betrayal, the shock, and then having to deal with other shareholders who may have been on the sidelines, and maybe they're on the sidelines because they wanted to be, or maybe they're on the sidelines because they're incompetent, whatever the case may be. Because it turns out that if you have money and you bring money to the table, that doesn't mean you have expertise in what's actually happening in the business. It just means that you brought money to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to ask yourself, whenever you're partnering with somebody, I've learned, okay, money is great, but what are the other aspects? And what's the baggage they're bringing in, right? So anyways, in that moment, that's when, when everything's falling apart, the shareholders basically turned to me and said, hey, we don't know who to trust. We don't know, which way is up and which way is down. And it was me and two other people in the company who basically, we were like the three musketeers. We were doing everything we could to hold that company together from a marketing and operations standpoint, a compliance standpoint, because we were in a highly regulated space, in the medical space. So there's things that you can fudge and there's things that you absolutely can't fudge in the medical space. So while you're trying to figure out everything else and put out the fire, you've still got to maintain all the other stuff. So it creates this incredible scenario. But coming out of that, I was the chief operating officer, and I had an incredible opportunity to rebuild or help rebuild and play a major role in rebuilding this company. And then what I learned in that moment is, at every phase of life, especially your professional career, when you're looking at decisions made by other people, you're like, oh, those guys are idiots. What are they thinking? Management is so disconnected from us. They just don't get it. These are such boneheads. And then you move up the ladder and you realize that perspective that you have now that you're on the other side of the desk and you understand the why behind the what, there's a lot more going on. And you realize that in many ways, if you're a frontline employee, or even I would say anything below a director level in most companies, you're a child. You're one of the kids. You're being taken care of. The parents are there, the directors, the C-suite, the shareholders, which might be the dysfunctional parents, but you have the management there, and part of their job is to manage up as well as down to prevent all the stress and the drama from leaking out from the top side and infecting the frontline team. So when I say children, I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. I mean it more in the sense of you almost as a leader of an organization, and at times we had 60 people, at times we had 30 people. It was huge fluctuations and, transitions of teams and things. Going through all of that, you have to approach it almost thinking about your team the same way a parent would think about protecting a child and allowing them to stay focused and keep going and manage the chaos in a way that makes it so it's almost like a magic trick. You have to pretend it's not there. And that was a very interesting experience. And for me, the end of it, when I exited, and I suddenly went from every day was putting out 50 fires, and you wake up to a inbox full of crisis and all the things that you have to deal with when you have full visibility and transparency across the organization, and you can really see things for what they are. You go from that million-mile-an-hour mental space to suddenly it's like someone hit a light switch, and now it's off. The engine's turned off. You're in the garage. It's dark. And all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, this is weird. I'd gotten so used to the adrenaline, the constant motion forward, and the feeling of knowing that the decisions you make have a real impact, and feeling that importance, not from a place of ego, but from a place of knowing that what you're doing impacts many people. So you have to be very fucking careful because you're going to mess up. And that's okay. But you have to be humble enough to say, hey, I messed up. How do we fix this? Because if you don't have a team around you, if you don't have that chosen family around you, and that's so important in the corporate world as well as the personal life, you're going to fall down and there won't be anybody there to catch you. Instead, there'll be people there just to point fingers. So I just learned over and over and over again. So that's why I say it's like a 20-year career in 6 years. And to be honest, we're not even scratching the surface. This is a very abridged version of all these events. But yeah, I mean, that's, I guess if you're looking for a story, that's the best one I can offer you.
It's great. That's a great story in and of itself. And a lot of things in that we can pick on. So, first of all, and you alluded to that earlier on as well, is that you can pretend to be mentally fit. So this guy came across to you as probably as mentally fit. Now he was successful, great inventions. He had obviously all this money and so on. So he would be seen on the outside as a mentally fit person. But in order for him to do what he did, he would have had to had some demons within himself to deal with. And having to pretend to be something he is not, to me, is a clear sign of lack of mental fitness. So he would be suffering from that in his own quiet space because he wouldn't know what is going on. So that's one side of the mental fitness. You just mentioned the word humble. Um, it requires mental fitness to be humble. Yeah. Because the humble, if it's true humbleness, if it's just like trying to make yourself smaller than what you are, then it's lack of mental fitness. But if it's true humbleness, that to me requires a significant amount of mental fitness to be able to be that. And so what I'm curious to hear a little bit more about, James, is in this journey you've just taken us, which spanned however many years with the ups and the downs. How would you describe yourself in terms of mental fitness? Because you would have had to had a reasonable amount of it to deal with that. But I can imagine there was always also be times where you go, Jay, what am I going to do? I can't handle this. Like it's like, how do I do this? Where there maybe was a lack of mental fitness. And then maybe if you can share with us along with that, did you do something specific along the way to go, I have to grow my mental fitness without, I know without using that language, but I have to do something to become stronger within myself in that process, or did that happen later?
I don't know exactly when the switch got flipped, but what I do know, and I would say it jokingly at the time, but I really meant it, was, in the moment of all the chaos and the storms and trying to, pull everything together, the reason that you show up to that extent is, again, going back to your community, your people. Who do you care about? Who are you trying to help support and take care of? And I would jokingly say all the time, because people would say, like, how do you deal with this mess on a daily basis? I'd say, you can always jump off the balcony tomorrow. There's no time limit on that. So, it's no big deal. And that's literally how I felt. It was like, look, I'm going to stick around. I'm going to take care of the team. I'm going to push through. But, worst case scenario, it all goes to shit. I'll just, jump. No big deal. And, you just get to that place where you're like, I don't have the option to let people down. And if I do, it's not going to be for lack of trying. Um, but then, like I said, you get to that place where suddenly you go from a million miles an hour to zero, and it's silence and it's eerie. And, suddenly that thing you've been craving, I just need a break. That thing you've been craving is suddenly horrendous. It's like, oh, who am I in the absence of all that? Because it's all very distracting. And so, I came away from that experience. I invested heavily in my mental health in terms of like meeting with therapists, psychiatrists, and uh, you know, really prioritizing it and saying, look, I don't think that I'm as healthy as I could be mentally. I think I'm kind of banged up. And what we learned was, or what I learned is, I basically was experiencing PTSD. And so, when you look at these things and you understand what it means to really be in that place where you really are thinking about it, I can just jump tomorrow. That's literally what gets you through the moment. Um, and then you get to a point where it's like you don't have to think that way anymore. It's quiet. It's supposedly comfortable, but you suddenly have the time to reflect. And for me, the double whammy was as I was working on my mental health, and I got to a place where I was like better mentally than I'd ever been in my life. really was feeling good, had this medical event occur where basically due to some complications. So I was born in a military hospital in Guam. And if you know anything about Guam, it's not exactly the most advanced corner of the world. And uh, the Navy is supposed to send expectant mothers to Tripler in Hawaii if they expect complications because they just don't have the ability to handle it there in Guam. Well, I, of course, decided that I wasn't going to do things the normal way. So I came out a bit early. And so when that happened, your lungs are rock hard as an infant, because in the womb you're not breathing. And so in those last weeks of gestation, that's when your lungs become soft and pliable and become that tissue that expands and contracts. Well, what they give babies to solve that problem that are premature is something called surfactant. Well, they didn't have that there in Guam, that they were lucky to have a Walmart, I guess. But they then had to medevac me to Tripler, which they is a 12-hour plane ride, but they had to bring a plane from Japan down to Guam. And the first plane they brought down broke on the runway. So I guess it's better than it breaking while we were in flight. But then, we ended up with a second aircraft. So there's a time window where you have to administer these medications. And that I just missed that window. And the type of respirator I was on was for an adult, not a baby. And so there's all these things like they're basically MacGyvering solutions, and God bless them. But my system got pretty banged up from that. And so it turns out that it's like a ticking time bomb, in this moment where, I mentioned, I bounced around between LA, Scottsdale, and then eventually moved to Denver. It just so happens that National Jewish Hospital out here in Denver is probably the best place to be if you have a respiratory problem. It's one of the top research hospitals in the country here. And, it just so happens that, I headed out here because for two reasons. One, it's a huge tech center. There's a Denver Tech Center is an amazing place to innovate, and so many companies are based here, or at least have tech teams here. But then on the other side, one of my friends, he was dealing with a potential foreclosure, and I was like, well, I can kill two birds with one stone. I can relocate to some place where I think I want to find my next job, and I've got a lot of recruitment opportunities out here, but also at the same time help a friend out. And it just so happens that making that choice resulted in myself being in the absolute best place to deal with what is basically a terminal illness. But, just because the expiration date on the milk carton isn't as long or far away, or sometimes it moves up and sometimes it moves down. But, at the end of the day, you have to, in that moment, think about what really matters. What are you doing this for? Because you start to live life with more intention when you realize that it's not going to go forever. And I'm not going anywhere tomorrow, but there's a certain amount of focus. And so for me, it's just been this weird chapter of my life where it feels like kind of like almost like I jumped off a boat and I've just been getting hit by the waves, and sometimes the waves bring you up and sometimes the waves bring you down. And now you're just getting back onto the boat. And it turns out the boat that I'm getting back onto is something that, going back to chosen family and the people that you care about and carry with you in your life. I have the opportunity, the privilege to work with all these great people who, have collected me over the years. And so now we get to build something really cool together. So you build around your limitations, but my takeaway is you just never stop going forward. And sometimes going forward means pausing and working on your mental health, because that's just as important as the work to pay your bills. If you're not taking care of your mental health, if you're not prioritizing it, you're really not setting yourself up for success.
No, I agree. And thank you so much for your openness and honesty of sharing that part of your life. And I definitely agree that working on our mental well-being, our mental health, which for me is done through building mental fitness. So to me, the solution to mental health problems from a mental point of view is by growing our mental fitness muscle so we become stronger. And the stronger we are mentally fit, the better we can deal with the challenges coming our way, because we can't stop challenges from coming our way. We can try and go and live in a cave, but there's going to be challenges there as well. So challenges will come whether we like it or not. How well we deal with them depends to me on the level of mental fitness we have at the time. And it's never black and white, and we can always keep growing it. I'm still growing my mental fitness these days in my life because I want to be even fitter than what I currently am, just like with physical fitness. So, and you mentioned something to me that really stood out as well, which was about meaning, losing meaning. And when you came out of that 1,000 miles an hour into 0 miles an hour, a part of being in 1,000 miles an hour gives meaning. And we as human beings, it seems to me that meaning is really important. So whether the meaning is family or health or a project or changing the world or saving the world or whatever it may be, or helping men with erectile problems, uh, that gives meaning to do that. And when that meaning is taken away, through, like in your case, what happened there, it leaves a vacuum. And again, the more mentally fit we are, the better we can deal with that vacuum without going down the drain and feeling useless and hopeless. And, an episode I did a few weeks ago was around the AI crisis that I see coming, whatever is going to happen with the AI. But one thing that I think is going to be there, no matter what way it goes, is that there's going to be a large number of people who are going to lose that meaning because they're losing a job that AI will take over. And that job for that person most likely gave them meaning, not just income, but meaning. And that vacuum, that mental health vacuum there, I think is going to be a big problem as we move forward. And you're welcome to speak into that if you want, or come back to your story.
No, I think it's an interesting point. I feel like in some ways we're blessed to have gone through COVID and the pandemic because it short circuited and fast forwarded our capacity as humans
Yeah.
to live on technology, to live the Zoom life for a while and isolate and do all those things and rely on technology to take care of things. But it also showed us, I think, you know, during COVID, everyone says, "Oh, if I only had time, I would go and run a marathon, and I'd be so fit, and I'd eat so differently, and all these things if I only had time." And well, COVID hits, and a lot of people had a lot of time, but I didn't see a lot of marathon runners, and I don't know that people were eating healthier during that time.
Mhm.
So it shows you that the the reality is you can think whatever the reason is you're not doing something. You can think whatever that reason may be, but the reality is you're making choices every day. And sometimes the choice you should make is the bad one. You should say, like, look, I'm going to lay in bed for an extra hour. That's okay. That's a good choice sometimes. There's no
Mhm.
guilt in that. And that's kind of the thing you have to, for me at least, it was learning not to feel guilty about not working 12 hours a day and not, absorbing and jumping on the grenade, because there was that feeling of, who am I in society? After I go from 1,000 miles to 0 miles an hour, when you're in the C-suite and you have that level of authority, um, people treat you differently. Like I can't tell you the number of times, my fat ass shows up to a meeting and people are like, whoever this guy is, and then they found out I was the COO of the company, and all of a sudden, oh well, we better, suck up. And you can see it in real time, as it's happening. And it's like it just fascinates me how transparent people are in that moment. But it also caught me because I realized that so much of my life I'd been spending my professional life, and again, it was only 6 years, 20 years and 6 years, but um, that time that felt like it was an eternity. I was picking my closest friends at times based on career goals and based on professional concerns, and I've had to recalibrate, and it wasn't because I had this great awakening and it was like, oh my gosh, I'm so enlightened that I had to recalibrate. It was because life was like, no, you're an idiot. You need to recalibrate or else life's going to suck. And I had to recalibrate and say, look, the people that matter aren't necessarily the people who can help you make $1 million tomorrow. They're the people who, despite them having $10 in their pocket, they would run across the street and pull you out of a ditch. And those are very different sets of criteria to choose that chosen family based on. And so there's this constant balance. And I feel like there was a long period in my life where I was so focused on my professional growth that I forgot to focus on the people who weren't necessarily in love with my title, but were actually in love with me.
Mm.
Because there's a big difference.
Mhm.
And um, so, yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate. I've been able to borrow a lot from my dad, who pulled himself up by his bootstraps, went into the Navy as an enlisted guy, went to nuclear power school. Then they realized, because the Navy's very efficient, they realized after he went all the way through nuclear power school that he's kind of tall to fit in a submarine. So then at that point, they were like, okay, well, maybe not a good idea. So then they sent him to flight school. But, and then he eventually went into the JAG Corps and whatever. So, I mean, really cool career. And somebody that really had to find their own way. So when you talk about mental fitness, that would be somebody I would look to and say, that's somebody with mental fitness to be able to jump through and grab all the brass rings that you have to grab to be able to pull yourself up to that extent in a lifetime. But having that person in life, someone who I could turn to and had given me a lot of the lessons. So in a lot of ways, I think I was more advanced in a more mature corporately than personally, if that makes sense.
Oh, definitely, definitely makes sense. And again, like the people that we are attracted to, it often depends on what our interests are. So if we're suddenly interested in golf, we start attracting people in the field of golf. And you go into the corporate world, and then you're starting being attracted by that, and naturally attract that to you. And then when that's gone, and you came in a completely different situation, oh, maybe I need to attract some other people. The difference here for me is along the way, how conscious are we ourselves in that moment? Are we consciously attracting the people that serves our inner world, our spiritual world, our essence of who we are, that is aligned with our core values in our life, or we are trying to attract the people that fits into our career journey or corporate life or business life? And again, for me, it always comes back to one way or the other to mental fitness, because the more mentally fit we are, the less we need to do things that are not right for us personally. Um, and then, because at the end of the day, I believe that when we're really staying true to who we are as people, we are going to be the happiest. And then we can go out and make millions of dollars or run businesses or run marathons or just go and get a job from 9 to 5. And all of that is kind of irrelevant where we go. We'll just go what suits our strength, like the skills we have and what we're passionate about. But if we don't have that family in our lives, whether it's our actual family or extended family and friends, um, we're going to be unhappy, no matter how much success we create in the outer world. And so for me, happiness seems to be what we all want. And in my experience, the more happiness that I can attract comes down to how mentally fit I am, in particular to deal with the challenges that are in front of me that I don't want. When my wife starts an argument, I go, oh no, not again. And then, my pattern is to run away. Yeah, that I'm really good at that. So I just run away. And of course, then she gets hurt. It doesn't solve the problem. And now the problem festers for the rest of the day or the rest of the week. But what we have learned in our relationship is to not let that happen any longer. So she still pisses me off. I still react. I still want to run away. And then, no, hold on. We know this is not working. Take a big breath, suck it up, mate, face her, and let's deal with it now. And then we can get over and done within a few minutes or a couple of hours at the most, where it used to take like 2 or 3 weeks. But that's because my mental fitness has grown and so has hers. So when I do come back into it, she doesn't need to go into a big argument or defensiveness and all of that. Like, okay, yeah, two adults talking about it. We can raise our voice a little bit. We can look annoyed at each other and all of that. But let's just move through this because we're going to have a happier rest of the day. And the sex life improves as well. So,
Yeah, it's all connected.
yeah, so absolutely. So,
Well, I'm gonna interrupt real quick. I before you ask your next question, because I there's so much I want to unpack from what you just said that I think was valuable. So one of the things you talked about was what is happiness, right? And I go back to one of my favorite shows, Mad Men. Don Draper, he has a great line in that show where he says, "What is happiness? It's just a moment before you need more happiness." And it rings so true to me.
Mm.
So you're talking about setting up your life in a way that you have a source of happiness. The other thing that struck me from what you just shared is that you keep coming back to mental fitness. And one of the things I've learned, or one of the frameworks that I like to think about mentally, is I like to ask, are you fracking or are you digging? So if you're fracking, now fracking is where they go down a hole that's already been dug, and they then go perpendicular to the hole to go and get to different resources that are to the left or the right of the area, the well that was producing before, because they can go into the shale that's nearby, and the likelihood of there being a pocket of fuel or whatever they're going after is fairly likely when they start going down the hole, but not all the way, and then frack, go perpendicular. So if you were fracking, when you're thinking about mental fitness, you wouldn't go there constantly. You'd constantly be going back and digging deeper in the hole, but you've actually, I think, reached the bottom of the hole, which is the most simplest breakdown of the sum of its parts, but also what are the actual parts themselves underneath everything.
Mm.
And so once you reach that place, the bottom of the hole, it can feel like you're really smart when you're fracking, when you're just working off of somebody else's luck or somebody else's thought, and you haven't really done the hard work of getting to the bottom of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I like to use that framework of, are you fracking or are you digging? Because there's a difference. And so if everything in your life can come back to, in an authentic way, to mental fitness, then in my mind, for you at least, you've reached the bottom of the hole. You've found the core concept that can't be broken down anymore.
Thank you for those pictures. You're really good at that. I love that. The language I use in that is width and depth. So for most coaches, actually, and particularly not too experienced coaches, it's more about width, like helping people with that problem and that problem, or and then that problem and then that problem, or that issue, whether it's business coaching or anything like that. Um, and there's a lot of money in that because people are, I just want more. I want that and that, and I want that width.
They just want a quick hit.
Also, they want a quick hit, absolutely. So when I come into the picture, I do the opposite. And I tell people up front, if you want to work with me, that ain't going to happen. I'm not interested in that. My work is about depth. It's about your depth, taking you into understanding the depth of you. So you can really find that essence of yourself, that source of yourself. Because in that is a natural confidence, not a made up, I'm confident. There's a natural confidence. There's a natural wisdom in there. And there's a natural high level of mental fitness in that place. And I'm not saying right or wrong. It's not that I'm doing the right thing. Other people, like some people, really need help with the width and dealing with, oh, got this problem, got that problem, with that. And yeah, go and sort that out. If you want to work with me, I'm not going to go there. It's about, for me, is helping you into depth, and very few people are ready for that. But
Well,
I'll,
if you were a medical doctor, what you're describing, I spent some time as an EMT, and what you're describing reminds me of when you're an EMT and you're responding to a situation, you're focused on the bleeding, the breathing, the thing that is not necessarily the core problem. You're not going to solve the fact that there was a car accident. That was the problem. But you are going to solve the fact that they're bleeding now, and so you're going to take care of that wound. So
Mm,
there's emergency medicine, which is, I think, the width that you're talking about in your industry.
mm,
Whereas you have the physicians who do surgeries and do primary care and all the other things required to help deal with the underlying thing that causes that emergent situation. So it's a very different practice of medicine.
mm.
And it seems to me like there's a lot of parallels there with what you're
Yeah,
talking about.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So we need to move towards the end of our, unfortunately, our time here together. We can always come back and do this again. I get a sense that we could talk and bounce forwards and backs for for hours. Um, but I want us to get for this episode to the end. And in that, there's sort of a couple of questions, and you've answered some of them already. One is a question around like how have you consciously grown your mental fitness along the way, or how did mental fitness just happen to grow, not because you consciously picked it, but you end up in this situation that just made you more mentally fit. So you shared some of that. And the other question is, are there any specific tools that you have used that you can recommend? Like, you mentioned therapy and counseling, and it might have been a book or a movie you watched or a course you did or by anything that you'll be happy to suggest to our audience here today.
Yeah, I'd love to unpack those. So, um, in terms of mental fitness, I think there's three broad areas where I've experienced the most growth. One is, the adversity, the empathy, and the connection to a team that you want to see win. That's something that really propels you forward from what you define as mental fitness, I think. The other is, you alluded to it, failure after failure. It's having the grit to pay the tuition of life and, charge forward for the real win, despite it all. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stay on the same path. That's not what I mean. I mean, you learn, you evolve, you change, but you just keep going. That's the main thing. Progress is success. And then the other thing that I don't think I would have realized in my younger self, but looking back, I realize is those moments of extreme betrayal or disappointment. You understand what little control you actually have over your team, your organization, the circumstances of the moment. You're just one piece of it, right? You're one speck on in the universe. And if you think that you can control everything and it's your job to fix everything, you're wrong. You're going to be miserable. You have to understand that you are going to have people who you would trust with a key to your house who will steal from you or will betray you or find ways to let you down, and you can't control that. All you can do is set boundaries and communicate. So those are some of the things that I think about when I think about mental fitness and those moments where that slingshot went forward for me.
Mm.
And then in terms of tools or strategies, I've really heavily been spending time. You alluded to AI earlier. Chat GPT is something, especially with the more recent models that they've come out with. I use it to reflect, and I ask it to interview me. I ask it to unpack what I think about something based on it asking me questions rather than the other way around. So I might start with a concept or something, and this is, I swear, Geoff Woods, he owes me, if he ever listens to this, he owes me a Porsche. I always recommend his book. It's The AI Driven Leader.
Mhm.
And one of the things he talks about in there is using AI as a thought partner and a tool to find new perspectives. So
Mhm.
if you sit down and write down your thesis about something, and then you ask it to interview you about that thing that you just told it about,
Mhm.
you're going to experience new perspectives, new discoveries that are pulled out of you by AI. So that's one way to use it to get more context in the moment and make better decisions organizationally. The other is going back to people, that chosen family. Invest in good people, hold on to them tightly. They don't have to necessarily be professionally good people.
Mhm.
They're people who they actually have your back when things are down, regardless of if it benefits them or not. Not the opposite of Machiavellian. And there's times where you have to be Machiavellian in life, but at least with those people, those are the people that you hold on to, and there's zero Machiavellian influence in those relationships. And then the more practical side of just thinking on paper. I say to my team all the time, if you haven't written it down, it doesn't exist.
Mhm.
Because the thing is, our heads, we have these horrible meat calculators that invariably were made for cavemen and were made to survive and deal with an environment that we don't live in anymore. And so we've evolved, society has evolved past our biological evolution. And so
Mhm.
now we're trying to match these things together. And so one of the tools that makes the biggest difference for me is writing things down and reflecting and being able to go back at the end of the day. I keep a log throughout the day, And I go back at the end of the day and read through that and go, okay, did I accomplish those things? Or do I need to think about this a little bit more? And thinking on paper. And I think about President Nixon, who, during my time in Orange County, his presidential library is out there. And I'm a history nerd, so I just had to go there and spend some time. And there's one exhibit where they have all of his yellow legal pads all gathered together. And what Nixon would do in the evenings, regardless of what you think about his politics or his behavior in office, the effectiveness of that man, especially on the international stage, was unparalleled. And the way that he accomplished the things that he did in his life, especially for somebody who is an introvert, is he really spent a ton of time in solitude, writing down thoughts, challenging his ideas, unpacking concepts, and really playing on paper so that in the moment he already had all the work done. And it was worked out in a way that you increase the RAM in your head by using paper and using, in my case, Google Docs. Please don't hack me. But, there's great tools out there that are available to us all the time. And we're so lucky to have these little rectangles of doom that allow us to jot things down in a way that backs up to the cloud. And you can continue on where you left off on whatever device you're on. It's an amazing time to have access to that. And that's the voice side of ChatGPT as well, is the ability to unpack concepts conversationally and have that information put into a format that's actually helpful and condensed. And it doesn't necessarily get it right all the time, but it's certainly better than you trying to write and think at the same time. And so the last thing I'll say, and then I'll finally shut up because I've been told I talk a little bit too much sometimes, is, you got to ask yourself what's next. In the moment, when you're dealing with whatever the thing is of the moment, if you're not thinking about what's next, you're idling, or worse, you're looking in the rearview mirror. And so if you can center yourself around what's next, and it's okay to deviate, it's okay to wander, in my experience, mentally and take a break from what's next, but you got to come back to it and use that as a centering tool to keep going so that, progress is success. That's really helped me in this chapter of my life. And I realize it's helped me quite a bit in the past without me understanding the framework or being able to verbalize it until now.
Awesome. Well, you just spent, I don't know how many minutes just giving one after the other. And the things there that I've actually never thought about in the way you were talking about it. So I just want to say thank you for all those. And I'm sure that listeners will have to sort of rewind and go and listen to the last few minutes again to pick up all these different gems actually that you put out there. So I won't do that. I'll just say straight up thank you for sharing that, and thank you for the whole time together and for being open and sharing a part of your life with me and with our audience here today.
This has been fantastic.
Excellent. So to our audience, thank you for tuning in, and I know that there's something here for everyone. So make sure to have a good listen, but more than just listening, to actually take some of these tools and ideas and insights and making sure to take action on those. Thank you for today. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Mental Fitness, the Gateway to Success. If you have stories of how mental fitness has benefited you that you are happy to share, go to my website, mikal.nz, click on podcast and fill in the guest application form. If you want direct support from me utilizing my 40 years of mental fitness learning and practice, email me at coach@mikal.nz or message me on LinkedIn. Any feedback, review, share, follow, like, or any other good stuff is of course appreciated. Thank you for listening to Mental Fitness, the Gateway to Success podcast. I'm your host, Mikal Nielsen.